our channel contacts in industry were raising the red flag weeks before what transpired on April 2nd. The thing that's fascinating is Trump ran on this policy. He published a detailed video on what he would do on this Agenda 47 website of his back in February of 2023. And if you just Google Agenda 47 tariffs, you can go watch it. It's a 5-minute video. It's basically exactly what he's doing. He said he was going to do it. He said it at every rally. He was elected, and he's doing it.
You're watching Capital Cause, and my name is Danny, and it is April 7th, the so-called Black Monday. We've yet to see it materialize, though, although we do see the markets down quite a bit. I was just looking at the U.S. markets in particular. The Dow Jones is down 2.6%, the S&P is down 2.2%, and the NASDAQ is down 2%. Now, I believe at the highs, the NASDAQ was down over 4% at the start of the day, but now it seems to have rebounded. Oil, which is your specialty, Doomberg, oil is at a $60 level, although we did see a $59 handle last night. Let's go ahead and kick things off here with you, Doomberg. Where do you want to kick? Do you want to talk about the markets in general, or do you want to talk about your oil call that's coming to fruition? You were one of the few oil analysts and energy analysts in general calling for a drop in the oil price, and here it is. So I'll let you open up whichever way you want.
Yeah, let's talk about the energy markets. I mean, it's what we watch the closest, and we've been relatively bearish oil for about 15 months. There's a whole genre of energy sort of market watchers who have fallen for this peak cheap oil trap, and the markets are very well supplied. OPEC, its power is being, dug out from under it, and driven predominantly by co-production of natural gas in the Permian, which we can talk about. But ultimately, what we saw on Thursday, I think, was a historic, sort of the type of thing that doesn't happen but every couple of decades. I think basically it's the end of OPEC as a functioning cartel. Oil has always been a managed market. Technology and other associated developments have made it cheaper and cheaper to get. The price direction for oil over time is down, especially in real dollars. You just plot the number of barrels of oil an ounce of gold buys you over 50 years, and you could see what I'm talking about. And so, I just think that OPEC had to bow to reality, and we wrote a piece on this that published yesterday. Ultimately, who knows what's going on behind closed doors, but whenever you have Russia, Saudi Arabia, and the United States engaged in high stakes, high level diplomacy for multiple weeks, and then you see something like OPEC pouring oil on a burning tape on Thursday and the way in which they did, it wasn't just a decision, it was the timing of the release of that decision that was very suspicious to us. And so I think some deal was cut.
For people not in the know, not initiated, what was the decision that you're referring to?
So on Thursday, at the height of the beginning of the Trump tariff panic, OPEC decided to accelerate its return to pumping at a higher capacity. Look, OPEC exists to manage oil prices higher. They've been a very successful cartel. All cartels are the genesis of their own undoing, because alternatives and substitutes get developed over time. And it got to the point where OPEC could no longer really dictate the market, and who knows what deal was cut behind closed doors between Trump and MBS and perhaps even Putin. But OPEC can't manage the market anymore, and the market found out on Thursday. Now, there will be people who will think that we're reading too much into a single move. We do think that this is a fundamental phase shift in the energy markets. We're going to write a follow-up piece with some more of our thoughts on it a little later this week. But that's the big move. OPEC basically cried uncle. And now what we're going to see is individual countries within the cartel begin to panic and cheat a little more and overproduce, because much of their fiscal budgets depend on generating revenue from oil. And then it's going to be a bit of a race to the bottom. President Trump wants $50 oil, and I don't know why people assume he won't get it.
I mean, what do you make of all these backdrops of war? I mean, you still have the Ukraine war going on over there in Europe. You have Chinese ships encircling Taiwan. Of course, you have the stuff going on with Iran as well. I mean, shouldn't all these be fuel, no pun intended, for increasing oil prices?
And look, to be very clear, if a hot war between the US and Iran breaks out, you can expect a spike in the price of oil. Like but sitting around waiting for it doesn't seem like a useful strategy. Ultimately, history teaches that all such price spikes should be fated. And it's much better to wait for such a spike to happen and then jump in knowing which direction of travel oil almost has to go. It's sort of a Pascal's wager bet anyway. Like if we have a nuclear war and we're all dead, who cares what your position is, right? So if we see a super spike in oil on a war in the Middle East, I'd wait for the spike to top off. And after about 20% from the highs, you can safely buy 6 months, outputs and assume that order will be restored. Sitting around waiting for it or trying to time when such spikes happen doesn't seem like a good strategy to us. Lots of people do it. I mean, the stock market is a casino. But history tells us that fading super spikes because of geopolitical unrest is a far better strategy than trying to time them.
Yeah, you're effectively going to have much bigger issues to deal with if that does happen than your portfolio being down, some percentage points. Well, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, and your portfolio doesn't matter in the worst case scenario. For all the heat that Jim Cramer takes on Twitter, he did say something on TV that stuck with me when I was younger, which is anytime there was a nuclear war fear in the market and stocks would go down, back in the Cold War days, he would buy them because who cares what you own if it actually happens? So it's like a risk-free bet. Buy the nuclear war dip, sell the nuclear war oil spike, and so over the long term, technology is deflationary and the real price of commodities go down and they converge. And we're seeing that now. And OPEC's desire to keep crude oil selling at a premium made an abundance of natural gas liquids and natural gas come to the market, and people started switching engines and pressure started growing, and it became harder and harder to maintain the desired price range of $70 to $90 a barrel. And eventually they had to give up, and they gave up on Thursday. I would not underestimate what happened on Thursday.
So you see this trend playing out for the foreseeable future?
Yeah. So again, first thing you have to understand when you study the energy markets is that in the long run, the price of energy commodities goes down. Now there are periods of shortages where prices go up, and there are periods of gluts where prices go too far down. But the human endeavor is a constant, unrelenting struggle against the forces of entropy. You need to waste heat in order to have a good standard of living. And we are really good at finding creative ways to create heat for cheaper. And so that's forever thus. And so what you don't want to do is sort of draw tangent lines to sine waves. I mean, if prices are going up because there's a shortage, that's great. Make hay while the sun is shining, but recognize what's coming, which is a glut of supply. And same on the low end. Like I think we're heading to a period of sustained low crude oil prices. By a period, I mean 12 to 18 months, and then the market will fix itself.
I see. Well, I'm looking at the markets now, and it looks like we are just a sliver away from being in the green now. The Nasdaq is only down 0.3% now. The Dow is still down 1.5%. So it looks like we might see some greener pastures today.
Yeah, I wouldn't read too much into the.
And now we have hit the green. We have officially hit the green now on the Nasdaq. It's up 0.5%. Go ahead.
Yeah, I wouldn't read too much into the day-to-day noise. The last couple of days about tariffs struck us as yet sort of a traditional Trump mania. He has a way of triggering these media freakouts, and broadly, they tend to settle down after a few days. Now, look, I mean, we wrote a piece before, quote unquote, Liberation Day, predicting that we would see a recession. Our channel contacts in industry were raising the red flag. weeks before what transpired on April 2nd. The thing that's fascinating is Trump ran on this policy. He published a detailed video on what he would do on this Agenda 47 website of his back in February of 2023. And if you just Google Agenda 47 tariffs, you can go watch it. It's a 5-minute video. It's basically exactly what he's doing. He said he was going to do it. He said it at every rally. He was elected, and he's doing it. Whether it's wise policy or not, I don't know. I think you just got to play the pieces as they are on the board. We haven't had a meaningful recession in a long time. Certainly not one where we allowed things to sort of get cleansed out. We saved a lot of zombies during the COVID lockdowns. So is there pain ahead? Yes. But, if you look at the 10-year chart of the NASDAQ, I mean, then you compare it to the sort of noise that you see on Twitter, it does give you some perspective. As somebody who, lived and managed and worked through the global financial crisis and the COVID lockdowns and various other recessions, I remember the dot-com bubble bursting. These things happen. They always feel like the end of the world. No sudden movements is sort of our philosophy. If you have a good solid portfolio, maybe you trim the edges a little bit, but I don't know. It doesn't seem like, felt like the fear index was pretty low Friday afternoon.
Yeah, especially like you said, if you look at a 10-year chart of this, I mean, these recent lows only take us back to about a year ago.
Yeah,
in the NASDAQ. So just a bit of perspective.
Yeah, you're right. I just pulled up SPY. Yeah, it's green on the day. All right, there you go. Crisis over.
There you go. Yeah, NASDAQ is up 2% now, all within the span of what? Since 11 minutes, we started.
See, you should have me on more often, Danny. Every time, it's like good luck.
You're a green chicken, and you bring green tidings. You bring green tidings to the stock market anytime I have you on. So,
but look, I remember negative oil. I remember $135, $145 oil back in the mid-teens, the 20-teens, when Matthew Simmons' book Twilight in the Desert was making its way around Wall Street, and everybody thought we were going to run out of oil, and no, we're not going to run out of oil. So as a general rule, it's important to observe markets without emotion. Play the pieces as they lie. So we have a tariff regime coming. Trump wanted to do it. He's going to do it. We're going to have a recession. There will be winners and losers. Trim your portfolio of the anticipated losers and add a few winners.
If you're looking for great deals on gold and silver, coins and bars from a company that you can trust, then you've got to check out the good folks over at Pimbex. This year, I've really gotten to know these guys, and all I can say is you're not going to deal with a better group of people. They're a family-owned gold and silver online bullion company offering the essentials and more at industry-leading prices while always providing first-class top-tier service. That's PIMBEX.com. And if you're looking to convert some or all of your retirement account into real gold and silver, give Pimbex a call. They'll help explain the process and get you started on the right path. Your support at Pimbex also helps support the channel. So reach out to Pimbex today. You won't be disappointed. And make sure to tell them Danny sent you. Yeah, and what's interesting, Doomberg, is that I think we're down like 20 some odd % from the highs as it relates to the NASDAQ. But I'm looking at the 10-year now, which is the North Star for Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, and it's up. I mean, it's up to almost 4.2%. So despite all of this, doesn't seem like they've moved it much. Is this going according to plan, do you think?
Well, again, I wouldn't read too much into the daily, moves to try to judge what really is a decades-long effort. I mean, what Trump is trying to do, again, with the wisdom of it notwithstanding, he is trying to undo 40 years of deindustrialization in the United States. Whether it's a wise thing to try to do, whether the tactics he's using to try to do it will work, and whether he has the political capital to survive the friction of the transition are all interesting questions that remain to be answered. When Trump was inaugurated, the 10-year was closer to 4.8, I believe, in early January. And now it came down to under 4 over the weekend. You could just view the rates and the S&P as sort of different sides of the same coin. I mean, flight to quality, people plow into treasuries. So during the peak of the sell-off on Friday, 10-year dipped below 4%. Now that there's a bit of a relief rally, who knows how long it'll last? Maybe it's a dead cat bounce. Who knows? You're seeing sort of money come out of rates and back into stocks.
Yeah, another asset class that I'm looking at now is the precious metals. Gold is still holding fairly strong at the $3,000 level, down about 5 or 6% from its highs. I believe it's actually down 3% actually. Silver is also still holding strong at the $30 level. An interesting observation that I made yesterday or last night was that as soon as the Asian markets opened, or the Chinese market in particular, the gold just shot up. Both gold and silver just shot up as if someone in China was just scooping this stuff up. What do you make of the precious metals in this kind of environment? How do you anticipate them being affected by these tariff wars and everything else going on?
So, full disclosure, I'm personally long a fair bit of gold. That the value, as measured in U.S. dollars, of that gold had grown quite substantially. And on Thursday of last week, I believe, maybe on Friday, I took about half of my gold off the table and parked it in cash for a bit. I'm still pretty long gold, but sometimes you have to prune your positions, which is the type of thing I was talking about earlier. So I'm probably cautious on the price of gold until we get through and we see which countries cut deals with Trump and so on, what the Fed does. And so I'm less, bullish gold than I was 2 weeks ago, and so I own less of it. That's sort of my philosophy.
I see. And copper too. Copper is also holding. I mean, it dropped from 525 to 428. It's still down today. But what do you make? How does copper relate to the economy? The cliche is that it's cut Dr. Copper, and you can, in a way, look at it as a proxy for the industrialization base of the economy. Given what we've seen in the price action of copper, what does that portend to the rest of the economy? It sounds like we're going into a recession, and the price of copper is down 25% from the highs from just a few weeks ago. So what do you make of that?
I think your assessment is as good as any. I think traditionally there's no need to overcomplicate it. When the boom times are here and people need lots of copper, the price of copper goes up. And when the market anticipates that we're going to have a bit of choppy waters ahead, then you lose the bid in copper and prices come off, with the understanding that over the long term, all commodities become cheaper. And so, in real terms, at least, I should say. And so I think that we are going into a recession. I think we're probably already in one. Again, we have a fair number of contacts in industry, and supply chains were seizing up in a way not seen since COVID. Not to say that such supply chain seizings were on the same level as what occurred during COVID. Nothing will compare to that. But if you had done absolutely nothing with your portfolio 2 months before COVID to today, you'd be happy, right? These things have a way of working themselves out. But one of the things about the whole tariffs reshuffle is GDP is really a measure of economic activity, right? And so ultimately, there's going to be a lot of scrambling going on as new supply chains get built and workarounds get found and businesses get creative. That's activity. Like, in the end, this too shall pass.
Understood. Let's go ahead and shift over to geopolitics, and more so specifically to Eastern Europe and Ukraine and Europe. It appears that Europe is taking it seriously now. All of a sudden, they want to, reinstitute the draft, and they want to reindustrialize their war economy. What do you make of some of the developments going on there? Is the U.S. I mean, Putin still hasn't signed a deal with Trump yet to effectively, create an exit plan for the U.S. And it appears that Trump is also getting a little restless with it. And so they slapped on these secondary tariffs, meaning that any country that deals with Russia would also get tariffed in the process. What do you make of these developments recently? Does Trump risk being stuck in Ukraine if he doesn't cut a deal soon? And why is Putin taking his time there to cut a deal?
I mean, there's a lot of nuance, a lot more nuance than is routinely presented in the media. I think we in the West have lived in a state of denial across two dimensions. One, that we could inflict a strategic kinetic military defeat on Russia from afar. Their supply chains are there. Ours are here if we're lucky, and a lot of them are in China, who's on the other side of this war. And two, that somehow the war is a stalemate. It's not a stalemate. We're losing that war, and Trump has the right instinct to get out of it. But the two sides are just too far apart. Why would Russia cut a deal when it's winning? The sudden calls for a ceasefire without restrictions. Why would the Russians do that? We're just going to rearm Ukraine. They're going to appreciate the breather, and then the war is going to continue. So no, there's not going to be an unconditional ceasefire. One of the reasons you don't get into wars is you might lose them. We're losing this war. I know people who feel strongly about the support for Ukraine get annoyed with me when I say that, but I much like our discussion on the markets, I think you just have to play the pieces as they lie on the board. And and by the way, Ukraine doesn't really want an end to the war. Anytime you hear Zelensky talk about his red lines, they're totally incompatible with the situation on the ground. And so the war will be ended militarily. It's sad. It's tragic. And Trump has not yet laid secondary sanctions on oil, to the best of my knowledge. He's threatened to. The tariffs weapon is getting dulled. So, by the way, Russia's a self-sufficient society. I think secondary sanctions won't work. Sanctions on Russia don't work. More sanctions on Russia won't make them work. Trump, again, with good instincts, decided that he would do his best to try to end the war, and he should be applauded for that. There's also a bit of strife in the administration between the old school sort of neocon types who would like a ceasefire, mostly to rearm Ukraine and to divert attention to China, but don't really want to absorb the losses that we have suffered. Like when you lose a war, it's hard to lose a war. And then the sort of more mega wing of the Trump party that thinks that Trump should just wash his hands of the whole thing, blame it on Biden, and walk away. It's getting to be too late to do that. The longer this goes on, it becomes Trump's issue. Blaming the predecessor only works for so long. But I think we're on a path now where the militaries on both sides will decide the conflict, and I think I know how that ends. Nothing Europe does is going to change the dynamic. I mean, Europe doesn't have the energy, literally doesn't have the energy to rearm. The tariffs are going to hit Europe particularly hard. And so we'll see. I think Europe lives in a fantasy world where they still have geopolitical power and people care what they think. Do you think the Chinese care what Ursula von der Leyen says or does? I mean, no. So it is what it is. There'll be lots of rhetoric and lots of money wasted. And the war will be decided on the battlefield. It looks like, sadly, I wish it weren't so, but that's our agnostic view of the situation.
Could Canada solve Europe's energy problems? Because you are starting to see them cozy up to each other, especially with Trump in the United States putting some distance between themselves and Europe. Canada, seemingly come into the fold now and has offered to replace the United States. And of course, they are resource rich. Could a Canada-Europe alliance kind of rejuvenate Europe's ambitions?
No, I mean, that's of course not. There's two main products that Canada has to offer the world, which is natural gas and heavy crude oil, and both are trapped. Like, yes, they're building a LNG export terminal on the west coast, British Columbia, but like natural gas in Alberta is $2 a million BTU. Once it gets on a boat, it's not Canadian gas anymore; it's global LNG. So, I mean, no, they're not going to replace the U.S. The heavy oil, they've got a pipeline now, again, to get on the water and basically sell to Asia, but nobody can replace the U.S. Europe had a good deal with pipeline natural gas to Russia. That deal is no longer there. They are stuck on global LNG, whether it comes from Qatar or whether it comes from the United States or whether it comes from Russia. Once LNG gets on the water, that's the global market for gas, and there's a price, and it's expensive. And so, unless Europe gets busy drilling, fracking, and making its own domestic energy, which it doesn't seem to be willing to do, then it's going to be stuck. And Canada is not going to save them. Australia is not going to save them. That's not how the energy markets work.
Mm. I want to go back to the military rearming of Europe. You're hearing all of these headlines from Europe about, again, reinstituting the draft. You see Macron walking around like he's Napoleon, surveying the military. You have all these declarations that we're going to create a war economy, a wartime footing, but it's going to take 5 to 10 years. Well, why? I mean, if you were Putin, would you wait around for them to load up? I mean, what's going on here? Like, if you're Russia, like they're kind of creating their own, they're prophesizing their own doom this way. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
There's not going to be a war between Russia and Europe. Europe better hope there isn't one. I mean, does Europe learn nothing from history? Honestly, like, please. Luckily for Europe doesn't have the jewels, literally. They do not have the energy to build effective militaries. Look, military might is a derivative of industrial might. Industrial might is a derivative of energy might. Europe has no energy. That's why it doesn't make its own steel. Where's the energy going to come from to make bombs? What do you think tanks and guns and ships and planes are made of? Very energy intense materials. Who controls that supply today? It's not Europe. That's why Europe doesn't make things anymore. This is all happy talk. It's just nonsense. I wish it would stop, but it won't. No, there's not going to be a war in Europe. Macron can strut around, again, like I said earlier, as if anybody cares what Macron thinks, honestly. I mean, and by the way, if Europe wants to go to war, let them. Why does the US need to be involved? Like, isn't it time we stop getting involved in European wars? I don't know. What good has it done us?
Yeah. Now, shifting over to the Pacific, the U.S. does have an eye on the Pacific. I believe it was Hexeth who said something along the lines of, I'm paraphrasing, of course, and he said something along the lines of, we need to find a way out of the European war and so we can shift over to the Indo-Pacific, namely China. And what's been interesting is that you have been seeing this buildup in Diego Garcia, and as a threat to Iran to come to the table and make a deal. But as soon as that happened, you saw China begin encircling Taiwan. And I've heard this thesis laid out in other channels, and it kind of makes sense to me. I want to get your take on it. Is this China's way of telling the United States that if you hit Iran, then we'll just take Taiwan? So it's kind of they're threatening. They're not threatening, but they're letting the United States know that they run the risk of losing Taiwan if they do start a war with Iran.
I mean, do we own Taiwan? I mean, like, the whole concept is insane. Like, I'm unabashed isolationist. I don't think we should have bases all over the world. I think going to war with China is a decidedly stupid idea. I think bombing Iran is a decidedly stupid idea. I think getting into a hot war with Russia was a decidedly stupid idea. When was the last war we won, Danny? Like, what are we doing?
Probably
like
World War II. Or what, the Korean War, maybe?
Well, that was fought to a stalemate. Vietnam, Afghanistan, Iraq. I mean, what are we doing? We have everything we need here in the Western Hemisphere. 2 giant oceans between us and the warring parties of Europe or whatever's going on in Asia Pacific. I don't understand why president after president, I thought Trump was going to be different. He certainly didn't start any wars during his presidency and ran on that and seemed to be proud of it. Why we would embark on a war. I mean, ultimately, Taiwan is just another example of Ukraine. China's supply chains are right there. The island means far more to China than it does to us. What are we doing? We didn't invade Formosa in World War II because it's an incredibly hard island to invade. If China, again, like, why is it our issue? I don't understand it. Isolationism never works or whatever. Then if you got to fight them there so that we don't have to fight them here, that's I mean, it's idiotic. If Taiwan and China come to a negotiated settlement, great. Like, why do we have to go to war? What? I don't understand it. I wish I did.
Yeah, my personal theory is that it's just the nature of the beast. Because if you really think about it, who is really attracted to political office and into government? It's really like these neurotic, control-y types, like highly control freaks, and those kind of people are again highly neurotic. They're control freaks, and so they need to be in control of everything. Isolationism may not doesn't gel with that personality type, so to speak. That's just what I
Yeah,
think.
I think that's entirely possible. I don't know. In my mind, like if you talk to the average person in the U.S. and ask them, would you send your kids to war to fight over who should rule the Donbass?
Right.
I mean, they're more worried about the price of eggs and getting their kids into a good school, and teaching their kids how to drive, and then praying every time they get behind the wheel that nothing bad happens to them. I mean, I don't really care about who rules Taiwan, to be totally frank with you. I mean, that's heresy in today's media landscape, where Fox News is 24/7. We got to bomb Iran. We got to bomb Iran. We got to bomb Iran. Why? Oh, they might get nuclear weapons. Well, no, North Korea has nuclear weapons. Here we are. So I don't know. I'm sure people will say that it's a dangerously naive stance to take. I can assure you that I've thought about it thoroughly, and all other options are worse. Make the Western Hemisphere an impenetrable force, and let the world figure out its own problems.
And that was kind of the modus operandi at the start of the administration. It seemed like we were going to this north-south strategy, i.e., really fortifying the North and South America. But it seems like we've been dragged back into the Eastern Hemisphere.
There's a bit of a civil war within the Trump administration. The Lindsey Graham types, the Mitch McConnell types, never saw a war they didn't love. Very, very brave from afar, committing other people's children to battle. And many of them have infiltrated the Trump administration, and Trump seems to be at least listening to some of them. It's a shame. All war is nothing more than a catastrophic failure of diplomacy. But here we are, forever thus. It's called forever wars for a reason, by the way. Like, when you're in the bomb making business, peace is a working capital problem, and there's a lot of very powerful people who make bombs for a living.
Right. If you were to, what's your current read of what's the developments going on in Iran? I mean, we have 7 B-2 bombers and Diego Garcia. We're bringing in. I mean, we've got all these military bases in the Middle East to the tune of 50,000 troops. Is this just a scare tactic to get Iran to the negotiation table, or do you believe Trump or whoever is the cabal, whatever, is serious about an attack on Iran?
Look, if Trump goes to war with Iran, it will be the failure of his presidency. I think it would be a catastrophic mistake. And if he makes it, that's on him. He will have to live with the consequences. I just think it would be a catastrophe. I see those reports. I don't know if they're real or not. Some of the propaganda is so thick, especially when it comes to getting people all riled up to go to war. I lived through weapons of mass destruction. I lived through Libya and Somalia and all this stuff, and Kosovo. The media is not objectively trying to relay the news to you. The media is trying to gin up support for yet another foreign adventure. I wish that Trump is. I hope that Trump is sort of just using this as a negotiating tactic. If we end up going to war in Iran, it will be a stain on Trump's legacy. And here's hoping that he doesn't.
Right. Well, let's close this out the same way we opened it up by talking about the markets. Let's go full circle here. I'm giving this one last look at, and throughout the entirety of our interview, Doomberg, I mean, we have been seeing immense volatility. At one point, we had 2% in the green on the NASDAQ, but now we're back down minus 1.3% on the NASDAQ, minus 1.8%. on the Dow Jones. So I've been watching this as we've been, talking, you and I, and it's just been going all over. I mean, I don't remember seeing anything like this, and at the very minimum since 2020. So it is erratic. It is crazy. What are your parting words that you want to tell everyone before we wrap up here?
I mean, panic has never been a source of good strategic decision making. I don't know. One of the reasons why I don't follow the markets tick by tick is because it's easy sort of to lose the forest when you see a few trees on fire. This too shall pass. The world will survive Trump's tariffs. Stocks were probably a little rich to begin with. There were lots of indications that a correction was coming long before Liberation Day. At some point, stocks will become a buy. Probably not here, but again, this too shall pass. Having lived through so many similar crises, you begin to get a little jaded to them, and so this doesn't get me all that worked up either way.
Can't someone like China, who owns a lot of U.S. debt, throw a monkey wrench into his plans and just dump their treasuries and thereby keep the interest rate elevated and just nullify any capital flow from stocks into bonds that may have occurred?
Sure, but they actually a bigger weapon is, I think, the sheer volume of stocks they own, U.S. NASDAQ type stocks, and so tariff wars, like other wars, there's generally not many winners in them. But again, lots of things could happen. I'd like to react to facts, not fears. See how things evolve. Trim your portfolio accordingly. By the way, like if your portfolio is such that you're sweating, up at night, refreshing, and panicking, you probably have the wrong portfolio. One of the reasons why I like to invest in the private markets is because they don't get revalued every tick, right? And you can have sort of the patience of a strategic vision, and pay yourself with dividends and all this other stuff. I'm very interested in the stock market, or
just don't make it a huge portion of your net worth,
right? Again, if you're sweating this move, you have the wrong portfolio for you. I think it's pretty simple. Now, if you trade for a living, you don't care which direction the market goes. You want the volatility that you and I are seeing on our screens today because you're a professional trader. I'm not a professional trader. It takes a certain special skill to be a professional trader. I don't have it. My objective is to compound my capital through what I call sweat alpha. And so, watching the day-to-day moves of the stock market is interesting. It's informative. It's part of what we do for a living. But if you're sweating moves like this, you have the wrong portfolio for you. That's my final message.
All right. Well, I think that's a great way to wrap things up here. Doomberg, I see you've got Doomberg.com there. Anywhere else people can go to reach you?
That's it. Doomberg.com, one-stop shop for all things Doomberg. Danny, always great to talk to you. Looking forward to the next one, and it's fun to watch your success. It's you're getting some great guests, and I know how hard it is to create a brand and to create a product like this, and you're doing a great job.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate it, Doomberg. Thanks again for coming on. It's always a pleasure talking to you. And guys, thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to support me and the channel's growth, be sure to hit that like and subscribe. I know it may not seem like much, but it does go a long way. And also comment down below. That also helps us in the algorithm. Comment, go Doomberg, go. If you agreed with Doomberg's analysis. If you disagreed with anything, that's fine too. Let me know what you disagreed on. Drop me a comment. I do read the comments. I may not be able to answer each and every one of them, but I do read them. And then also check us out on Substack. It's capitalcosm.substack.com if you want early access to my videos before the YouTube audience does, and ad-free versions of my videos so you don't have to suffer through the YouTube ads. And then also an added bonus is uncensored videos for the videos that warrant it. So with all that said, also check out our good partners over at Pimbex. For all of your gold and silver buying needs, I mean, we alluded to, gold and silver have been relatively resilient, and more specifically gold, amidst all of this chaos. That's PIMBEX.com. So be sure to check them out, guys. All right, I'll catch you in the next episode. Thanks for watching. Bye.